Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Week 14. This is the War Room, powered by Pro Football Focus, and I'm your host, Jeff Ratcliffe. If you're here, if you're hanging out with us, or if you're watching this on the YouTube feed, that means you're probably in the playoffs. Congratulations. I'm going to save any Jim Mora impersonation for somebody else, but we're going to get into things. A half-hour show this week. So with me, Mike Clay, of course, the great Mike Clay, and Michael Moore joining us this week as well, filling in for Pat Thorman. Mike Clay, what's going on?
Oh, not too much. Ready to talk some football. Man, busy morning already.
Lots going on. Michael, thank you for joining the show. How are you today?
Good, man. How are you?
Fantastic. Can't complain. Plenty of playoffs, including the PFF Staff League, where I'm already in a big hole to Nate Yonke. So hopefully I can climb out of that. But yeah, let's hit the ground running today. Mike, do you want to maybe run through some of the news that's come across already, and then we'll get into the questions that we have. We already have some questions lining up.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you were following football news throughout the week, it looked like Rashad Jennings was probably going to sit out this week. I came right out and said I was a big Andre Williams fan. I thought he was going to produce running back one numbers. I took a lot of heat for that. A little disappointed. Now it looks like Rashad Jennings is in fact going to be active today. So, he probably won't be his normal 100% self, but I think he'll play enough, get enough goal line work that he's still worth consideration as a running back too. Also, I heard, and this isn't official yet, but it looks like Sean Green may sit out, which kind of improves Bishop Sankey's value a little bit. I think he's kind of sneaky. Nobody really talking about him. But he's probably a strong running back 2 option this week as well. So some reports that Andre Ellington may go on IR. So if you're a Marion Rice owner, you took a shot on him, that may pay off down the stretch here. Certainly if you're in the playoffs, maybe on a bye this week, you need to be thinking about running back going forward. And finally, Mark Ingram. Chris Mortensen said back to a committee. They already pretty much use a committee, but Ingram should, I think, do most of that damage on early down. So still like him as a running back too this week.
I'm seeing here, too, that it says Andre Williams expected to start. Is there any value to be had with Jennings or Andre Williams this week? I mean, I know a lot of people are probably going to have some questions about this. Or do you anticipate possibly maybe a 50-50 or something along those lines?
Yeah, I could easily see a 50-50. I think we'll still see a lot of Jennings on passing downs. Keep in mind, Chris Obenai inactive, so they only have 3 running backs. That tells me they're pretty confident Jennings is going to hold up for this game. So wouldn't surprise me if it's closer to 50-50 or even if Andre Williams plays more snaps. But I think if you're looking at daily, I'd probably avoid these 2 guys. Maybe if you're really desperate, you could kind of throw Andre Williams in there cheap if you're just kind of throwing that position away. But in normal weekly lineups in the playoffs, I mean, again, it's a little risky situation. I probably would not want to use Williams. Jennings, I might be more likely to use as a running back too, just because he's been pretty darn productive when he's played this season.
Now, dealing with these injuries is always tricky at this point of the year, and obviously owners have had a bit of a problem with Roddy White sitting out last week after confidently saying that he was essentially going to play, and it didn't happen. What are we going to assume about him this week? This is a question from Chris. So what are we assuming, Mike, this week for Roddy White?
Yeah, I mean, I think if he goes, he's going to be pretty much a full go. I mean, that's kind of what we would expect. Of course, we've seen him be a decoy at times, too, in his career. So it's definitely a little bit concerning. Again, I would not love him in my lineup, but if he plays and starts, he's probably going to play a good 55 or so snaps. And that's enough to put him in that offense, make him at least a borderline wide receiver too. So, if you're a little weak at wide receiver in terms of depth, and maybe you have Harry Douglas and you can wait, that's not that big of a deal. But, if you have a guy like maybe, I had a question earlier today, Torrey Smith, should I put Torrey Smith in or wait on Roddy White? In that situation, just go with Torrey Smith. Don't even worry about it. Don't worry about the headache in case he's inactive or limited. It really depends what your options are. But I guess the advice is avoid where possible. But if you're weak there, it's not too bad of an idea to hang on.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Now, I'll toss this one over to Michael. This is a question from W. Wet, and he's appreciating all of our thoughts on these receivers. He's got a choice between Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, and Jordan Matthews in a half-point PPR league. Michael, who are you going with if you have the choice between those 3?
I wasn't a big Evans believer early on, but he's fully convinced me. So I think in any scenario, PPR or not, I would go Mike Evans over those other 2 any day.
What are your thoughts, Mike?
Sorry, what's the question?
Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, Jordan Matthews, half-point PPR. You have to pick one.
Yeah, I'm going with Mike Evans. I think he's a wide receiver one going forward. I mean, there was and I think I mentioned this last week. All season long, I've pretty much been, higher than everyone on Vincent Jackson because he's getting the high targets, he's getting the touchdown opportunities. Now Evans has kind of taken that spot over, and he's obviously performing at a higher level. So, definitely Evans, wide receiver one material going forward.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. Yeah, I mean, you have to like the Keenan Allen coming off a strong performance, but he's more of a wide receiver too. Jordan Matthews, boy, this game. As an Eagles fan, I'm a little nervous about this game against the Seahawks, but certainly Evans offers the highest ceiling and the highest floor out of those three. And looks like we have, again, the same question, similar question here from George. You're going Mike Evans over Jordan Matthews. He's looking for news on Levante David, though, and I guess I probably should bring that up. The Bucs have said that they're optimistic, and I'm going to use that word in quotes, that David plays today. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. He was limited in practice all week, and it's one of those situations where it really wouldn't surprise me either way. If he plays, if he doesn't, it's a great matchup. So if he plays, you're going to obviously start him. Don't be worried he's going to be on a pitch count. But if he doesn't play, hopefully you have Danny Lansana as a backup. Lansana was electric last week, put up a ton of tackles. He's actually the preferred play over Mason Foster in Tampa. So if that's a situation, or maybe you have somebody else, because you're going to want to make sure you kind of hedge there a little bit because, like I said, this is really up in the air, and there's a really good chance that he doesn't play again. I mean, they really don't have any reason to rush this guy back out on the field. So, cautious is how I would approach the Levante David situation. All right, a question regarding it looks like the Bengals running backs from Eric here. First and foremost, non-PPR, Jeremy Hill or Giovanni Bernard. And Mike, I think this is something you actually talked about on Matthew Berry's podcast this week. So why don't you take the lead on that one?
Yeah, I think many would agree that Hill is the right play here. That being said, he's probably riskier than he's been over the last month or so, even when Bernard's been active, and that's because he's a rookie and he caused some problems in the locker room. He complained about the play calling, I guess. So. You never know. I mean, obviously they're upset with him, and he could end up coming out and playing 12 snaps in this game, or not playing at all. We just don't really know if they're going to punish him or not, and that's obviously a concern. Now, if you watch practice all week and there reports from beat writers, and there's no real aggressive reason to believe that that's going to be the case, but it could be. It's definitely a risk, and it kind of makes me want to downgrade him slightly. That being said, again, it's a run first offense going up against Pittsburgh, who's kind of been mid-pack against the run lately, and he's playing pretty well. I mean, you have to look at him as a mid-pack running back too, and I would start him over Giovanni Bernard.
Yeah, Pittsburgh getting Shazier back this week, it looks like, which is a little bit of an upgrade to that run defense over Sean Spence and Vince Williams. But yeah, I'm going to agree with you there, Michael. Do you have any other thoughts on the Bengals running back situation?
Yeah, not much different. I think both of them at this point are at the very least running back twos for both of them. But again, it's just too risky that you don't know which one is going to get the majority of carries. So you got to be cautious on that.
Yeah, and speaking of risky starts, if you had the choice between Eli Manning and Matt Ryan, Mike, who are you going with there? That's a tough one. Eli obviously maybe in the better matchup. Matt Ryan in a really tough situation playing in Lambeau in December. So who are you starting if you have that choice?
Yeah, I'm going Ryan here. I think that he's going to, this is already a very pass-heavy team, and they're going to have to throw a lot in this game. So, Green Bay usually does pretty well against the pass, but, they're always leading. Teams have to throw the ball a lot, and I think we're going to see that a lot from Matt Ryan. So, he could easily score, a touchdown or two in garbage time, and obviously, this is, again, an offense that throws the ball a lot. So I think that always, although Ryan is, what I think of my stat the other day, of the top 20 in fantasy points of quarterback this year, he is the lowest percentage inside the top 12 at 25%. So, I don't like him as a quarterback one, obviously, but, he's probably going to consistently get you those strong QB2 numbers. So that's kind of where I look at him this week, and I think he gets a slight edge over Eli in a game where I think the Giants are going to be able to run the ball a lot. At worst case scenario, it should be a close game, so I think the Giants will be able to run it a lot.
Do you agree, Michael?
Yeah, any chance you get to have a shootout, I think you got to go with that, and I think Falcons Packers game definitely qualifies for that. So yeah, I would go Matt Ryan too.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. It is close. It's certainly a tough decision, but Ryan's going to give you the higher ceiling. A couple actives coming across the wire here. Charles Clay is going to be active, so anybody who is maybe hoping to save a little money at tight end, starting Deion Sims, doesn't look like that's going to
Hey,
work.
Clay's cheap too, though. I like Clay. I think he's a sleeper. Everybody's going to be on Jordan Cameron now because he's active. I
Uh-huh.
think
Yeah,
Clay's undervalued.
and if you were concerned at all about Justin Forsett, don't worry, he's gonna be active. And that's not a big surprise. All right, Torrey Smith looks stiff and limping in warmups. I haven't seen that in the news here, but Troy just mentioned that. We'll keep an eye on that. We got 18 minutes left in the show. By the way, folks, if you're watching on Twitter, feel free to hit us up with hashtag War Room. I am monitoring the Twitter feed, so if we see anything, we'll get to it for sure. But we still have plenty of questions lining up here. By the way, folks, too, if you're in the chat itself and you got your question answered, jump over to the YouTube video. Just watch from there because there's plenty of people. I'm surprised at how many people are still active. That's great. But we do want some room for everybody to get in. So DJ needs two wide receivers out of a laundry list, and try and pare these down a little bit for us if you could too as well, folks. But we'll go for this one. In a PPR league, Mike, plenty of options here. Kelvin Benjamin, Stedman Bailey, Stills, Moncrief, and Charles Johnson. So you gotta pick two of those. Who are you going with?
It's easy for me. Two top 20 receivers on that list easily. Kelvin Benjamin. Cam loves going to this guy. Loves forcing him the ball at the goal line. There's a lot to love there. I like Benjamin. Must start every week, obviously, and daily too, especially going up against New Orleans. They're gonna have to throw the ball plenty there. And Kenny Stills, I like right now. He's their number one wide receiver right now. We just kind of have to accept that. Marcus Colston, he'll stick in that 17 and 19% range of the targets, but Stills obviously has a big play ability, seeing more underneath work, and obviously a talented player, one of the most efficient, maybe the most efficient player in the league last year at wide receiver on those limited targets. So I like him a lot. I think those guys are both top 20 options and the easy picks there.
Do you agree, Michael?
Yeah, I know. I hate to be boring still, but yeah, I'm going with Benjamin and Stills. I mean, look, Stills has emerged as Breeze's favorite target, especially the last couple of weeks, and Marcus Colston just is not what he used to be. So, yeah, whoever the top receiver is in that offense, I think is a very good play. And look, Benjamin, even though again a guy I wasn't that high on early, but he's proven he can handle the load at least as a top receiver in that offense anyway. So, yeah, between those four, those two are pretty easy.
Yeah, I agree, though one thing did stick out to me, Mike, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Just the fact that Kenny Stills did all that production on 25 snaps, is that at all concerning to you from last week?
Not really. I mean, I did mention that in my Fantasy 32 at Insider this week, but that being the case, we've seen this for years with Sean Payton. This is nothing new. Look at Jimmy Graham. He's always, a top 2 fantasy tight end. He doesn't always play at the goal line, and that's been the case for years. This is not something new recently that occasionally he's not in at the goal line, and we see that with wide receivers too. Lance Moore, when he was doing big things for in that Saints offense, he was not playing every down. They would use Robert Meacham in the second half to block in a lot of games. So this is not a big surprise. Stills will be out there when they pass the football, so I wouldn't be particularly concerned. Again, good player, and he'll obviously a pretty darn good offense as well.
And a solid start in daily. I actually like a lot, if you can get your hands on a lot from that game. Cam Newton, a good start. I typically don't like starting him in daily leagues, but I think he's a good play this week. He's a little bit cheaper than some of the big names, and he can put up some solid points. Jonathan Stewart, dirt cheap. Of course, Jimmy Graham maybe gets the preference over Rob Gronkowski, and he's cheaper than Gronk across the board on all sites. So a lot to come from that game, and a lot of active news coming across. Deshaun Jackson inactive as we expected. Torrey Smith is active. Anthony Barr inactive, so that means Gerald Hodges is going to be the probably an every down linebacker for the Vikings. Levante David is active. Okay, so any concerns there? I would get him immediately in your lineups. David is arguably the number one. IDP play outside of a guy named J.J. Watt this week. So rock solid there, and you have to like that. Back to the questions. We have a dynasty question, and we have a dynasty guy with us. So, Michael, I'll toss this over to you. John was offered Travis Kelce and Justin Hunter for Chris Ivory and a late first-round pick, so somewhere in the 8 to 12 range. He's wondering if he should accept, and it's always tricky when you have those draft picks. I mean, a lot of it depends on how the quality of the draft class. I mean, we were kind of spoiled this past year with all the wide receivers. So what would you do in that situation, Michael?
Yeah, you're right. It's tough. A lot of different factors for that draft pick. Is it later? Is it earlier? But, for me at this point, I might accept that actually. And I know that's not that's not conventional, but for some reason, Andy Reid is not utilizing Kelce as we all want him to. And look, as long as the Chiefs keep winning, I don't foresee Andy Reid doing a complete philosophy change. So, and look, Chris Ivory also not a bad option as a throw-in for that trade. So I might do that actually.
All right, very good. It looks like Kemmel Wright is also inactive today. Whew, things are getting bad for Tennessee. Now let's get to all these questions. 12 minutes left to go in the show. Troy with a question. Standard League, he needs to pick one out of Ryan Matthews or Rashad Jennings. Pretty close there. Or he could also pick up Bishop Sankey. Mike, what do you do in that situation?
I would use Sankey, I think. I mean, this is tough. My projections still love Jennings. I mean, as much as I try and knock him down in terms of carries and targets, even if he gets, 45% of the carries and maybe 8-9% of the targets, which is down a little bit from what he normally gets, certainly in the carry department, he's still playing Tennessee. It's a great matchup, a great chance to score a touchdown. He's a pretty effective player. And the Giants are kind of mid-pack in touchdowns, but you figure you give them a boost against Tennessee as well. So, it's hard not to like him as a 2 option just to throw in there. But I think Sankey, the Giants' run defense has struggled as well. I mentioned him before as a bit of a sleeper. So I think he's definitely the right play here. And I think the other one was Matthews. I'm just never really a big Matthews fan. Doesn't do a lot as a pass catcher, and he was very lucky he scored a touchdown last week, or he would have been killing his owners.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris had a quick question about tight ends, and I think I'll just handle this one. I think we'll probably agree across the board. It's Charles Clay or Austin Seferian-Jenkins. I think the play is automatically Clay. Don't even doubt it. And Mike, your projections love this guy this week, so certainly going to get him in your lineups. But Mike, following it up, another question from Troy about Josh Gordon. Okay. Obviously everybody wants this guy in their lineups, but what are your expectations for Gordon in Week 14?
Yeah, my numbers just never seem to love this guy. I mean, last year they did because Cleveland was so pass-heavy. This year they were extremely run-heavy, and Brian Hoyer is not good. This is an offense that doesn't score through the air. It hasn't done it since Gordon's been in the lineup either. Nothing is particularly changed. I mean, obviously Gordon's going to make that passing game better, but they're still not scoring touchdowns through the air or scoring touchdowns overall, really. So that's definitely a concern. That being said, he would have had Vontae Davis today. He's going to be out, so he goes up against Josh Gordon versus Josh Gordy. Seriously, that's really going to be the matchup. So Gordy, it's basically the opposite end of the spectrum. If you look at fantasy points per target of the top 96 cornerbacks playing this week, the top 3 in each team, Gordy is dead last, as in worst in fantasy points per target. So that tells us, it's an outstanding matchup for Gordon, and that he's a wide receiver 1 option for sure. Yeah, you really have to get him in your lineups.
Yeah, absolutely. A question from Eric regarding Jarvis Landry. Now, I don't have information on whether this is PPR or not, but Landry really emerging. Another one of those wide receivers from this rookie crop that is just, meeting and exceeding expectations in this rookie season. But would you consider him, Michael, over the Bengals running backs, or are you going to lean towards the Bengals running backs?
Yeah, I would use Hill in that scenario. Landry does have a plus matchup against Baltimore this week. Matt Elam he's also been awful in coverage, and he's probably going to cover the slot. Fladarius Webb's in there a little bit. He struggled as well. So it's definitely a good matchup for Landry. But, I think this could be a low-scoring game. Baltimore defense is pretty good. They've been getting, they're obviously their outside corners are a bit weak as well, so you could see some damage from maybe even Hartline can sneak in there. Brandon Gibson sneak in a touchdown. I like Mike Wallace very cheap and Daly as well, so could be a good game for these guys. Landry, I just don't see the ceiling other people see. I know he had that 2-touchdown game, but very low average depth of target, lowest in among wide receivers with at least 40 targets this season. Guys with low average depth of targets just don't score touchdowns. They don't sustain it. Look at the history of it. It just doesn't happen. He has 5 this year. You can't expect that rate going forward. So, like the matchup, little concerned about his upside, so I think I'd go with Hill and hope he finds the end zone.
And I don't think that's really shocking at all, given the scouting report on this guy that his average depth of target is really short, because he's not a speed guy. I mean, he is what he is. He's a very efficient receiver, but he's not going to blow anybody away. So certainly outkicking his coverage there. But that Ravens defense, I did want to bring up. Haloti Ngata suspended. This could really impact things. Now, I'm still, I'm bullish on C.J. Mosley in IDP leagues. He's not going to have Ngata eating up a lot of blockers, but we'll have to see, because losing Jimmy Smith earlier this year and now without Ngata, this could be trending downward for this Baltimore defense. But I did want to get Michael's thoughts on that as well. You're going with the Bengals running backs as well, or?
Yeah, for all the reasons Mike said, I think they just have a better shot at scoring a touchdown. And for a flex spot, I think that's what you look for. Who's got a better opportunity to score? And look, if this were PPR, I might consider it, but even then, I think I still like Hill or even Bernard over Landry on that.
All right, KVC has a tough running back dilemma here. He's choosing 2 out of Ryan Matthews, Doug Martin, Dexter McCluster, and Alfred Blue. Blue actually got a little bit more work than I expected last week, but I think we're probably going to toss him immediately, and almost probably have to toss McCluster here, even with Green inactive. Mike, you agree? You're going Ryan Matthews and Doug Martin out of that bunch?
Yeah, I don't like Doug Martin at all. I mean, he probably, obviously he had his best game fantasy-wise last week, but he did it on, I believe that was a reception. He didn't run the ball particularly well. None of the backs did, and it's just, they're going up against Detroit. This could be one of them games where they have 13 carries for 22 yards as a team. I mean, it just would not be inconceivable to see that. I talked down Matthews a little bit before, but, obviously he's playing better. He's in a better offense, and he's playing at home against New England, kind of mid-pack against the run over the last month or so. So I think Matthews is not a great play, more of a back-end running back too, but he's the better play here.
I'm sure Doug Martin is a nice person. You should like a little bit. Mr. Moore, let's toss this one over to you. In a standard league flex spot, you have Latavius Murray returning from concussion. 4 touches, was absolutely electric the last time we saw him. Kenny Stills, Marcus Colston, or Stephen Taylor, and he needs, I'm assuming, 1 out of this group. So who are you starting there in a standard league?
For me, I think it would be Kenny Stills. I think he has a better opportunity to score, quite honestly, out of those 4 guys. I mean, of those 4, Stills is really the only one that you can count on to see the ball. And like you said, he only had 25 snaps, but look, he makes those 25 snaps count, and they definitely look for him. So for those 4, I would go Stills.
What about you, Mike?
Hold on. Got to get caught up again. I'm reading the news. It was Stills, and who are the other 3?
Latavius Murray, Marcus Colston, and Stephen Taylor.
Yep, I agree with Mike. I'll go with Stills there.
All right, plenty of questions on Twitter, so we're going to get to these with 5 minutes left in the show. Our buddy Giles, who is an every weeker here, needs, in a standard scoring league, in a flex spot between Ryan Matthews, Roddy White, and Mike Wallace, and he's leaning Matthews. Mike, in a standard league, do you go away from Matthews? Do you possibly look at Mike Wallace in this?
In standard, I have them both scoring right around 10 points. So for me, this means go wide receiver in this scenario, because Wallace, again, he's going up against these outside corners in Baltimore, led Ari Sweat, Danny Gore. They're rotating a couple other guys, and they're not playing well at all. And I almost hate this. I'm kind of bitter with Miami right now, because I had a great daily week going last week, but I went Tannehill, Wallace, and with one of them with a lot of points already, and they kind of let me down. But I think you got to forget about that and look at this as a great matchup. Wallace Probably not going to get you elite production, but it is a good matchup. He's a good chance to score a touchdown, something he's done quite a bit this season. So I think that gives him the edge. I think the upside there is just higher.
Yeah, I do agree with you there. And Josh just joined the chat here. Josh is asking about Torrey Smith or Andre Johnson. You know, this is interesting following up the Fitz Magic week. In that week where all of that took place, Andre Johnson, I mean, did find the end zone, but not as much as you might have hoped out of him in a week where Ryan Fitzpatrick goes completely nuts. But with Torrey Smith banged up, Mike, do you lean Andre Johnson here? Is this just an automatic Andre, or do you give any consideration to Torrey Smith?
Yeah, I definitely use Andre Johnson against Jacksonville here. Torrey Smith, you know, he's obviously not 100% like you mentioned. And also, we don't know who Brent Grimes is going to cover. I know a lot of people are connecting the dot between Steve Smith and Brent Grimes. I'm not entirely sure where that's coming from. I haven't really seen it reported, just kind of speculation. Keep in mind, Grimes plays his side 86% of the time. He doesn't always shadow. He's only done it a couple times this season. I tweeted the kind of the breakdown of that earlier today. And so you can kind of take a look at that. You know, there's the comparison I made was to San Diego. You kind of say Torrey Smith and Malcolm Floyd are used similarly. Steve Smith and Keenan Allen are used similarly in those offenses. And he did not shadow in that game either. He wasn't on either guy. So, you know, I don't know. I could easily see him staying in the side, which means that, you know, he'll see some of Torrey and some of Steve Smith who do move around. So it's just something to keep in mind. I'm kind of expanding on my thoughts about that game there. But I think Andre Johnson, just because Torrey beat up tough defense, could see some of Grimes, it's enough to push Andre over.
Yeah, and keep in mind Cortland Finnegan and Jamar Taylor out for Miami, so that's pretty banged up secondary there too. So whoever Grimes isn't on is likely going to be open a bunch of the day. Michael, your quick thoughts there on that, Andre Johnson, Torrey Smith, before I get to this DB question from John.
Yeah, it's pretty close, but like Mike said, I think you got to look at the matchup and look. Anyone against Jacksonville probably has a good shot at scoring points. So yeah, I would go Johnson based on the matchup.
Yeah, it's a pretty easy start, I think there. Don't kick yourself if Torrey Smith outscores. And by the way, that's just good advice in general. Start the players who are going to give you the best opportunity to score the most points. Don't get cute. If you have somebody who you're going to get cute with, just remember, can you live the entire offseason with that stud on your bench going off, or would you rather the cute play go off on your bench? I think it's a no-brainer there. Dance with your date. And, of course, if you want to dance with a defensive back this week, a choice between Brent Grimes, Ron Parker, William Moore, and Kenny Vaccaro for John. I'm going William Moore automatically here against Green Bay. Great matchup for defensive backs, and Moore played every snap last week after being activated from injured reserve. And then the other one it's close. I do lean Ron Parker just slightly over Vaccaro. Vaccaro really just his tackle frequency was pretty low this season, surprisingly so. So I would prefer Parker, who's just been really active since getting an expanded role, and especially with Eric Berry out, should have plenty of opportunities there for tackles. That's going to do it for us this week. The abridged edition went very fast, and best of luck to everybody. We're going to get going here for Week 14. Enjoy it. Hopefully you're all back with us next week, Week 15. I think Pat will be back with us again. But I want to thank Michael for jumping on board. Of course, for Mike Clay, for Pro Football Focus, for Michael Moore, I'm Jeff Ratcliffe. That's a wrap.